When people talk about hard work, they often imagine intensity. They picture long nights fueled by coffee, a sudden surge of energy, or a dramatic burst of effort that pushes everything forward. And yes, intensity can be impressive, but here's the problem: intensity doesn't last. It burns hot, but it burns out. If you rely on intensity alone, your journey will always be stop and go. You'll sprint for a week and then collapse for a month. That is not how success is built. Real success is the child of consistency. It is the result of showing up day after day, regardless of whether you feel like it. A strong work ethic doesn't depend on mood, it depends on discipline. You keep moving not because the moment feels exciting, but because you've committed to the process. That is why consistency will always outrun intensity in the long game. Think about fitness. Anybody can go to the gym for 5 hours in a single day. That's intensity. But what matters more? 5 hours in one day or 1 hour across 5 days, repeated for years? The second approach transforms your body. The first leaves you sore and exhausted but unchanged. Success in any field follows the same principle. It's the repeated small acts compounded over time that create real transformation. Consistency is hard because it is boring. It demands repetition, patience, and resilience. The novelty wears off, and what's left is the grind. This is why so many people quit. They want the thrill of intensity, but not the discipline of routine. They mistake excitement for progress, when in fact progress is made in the slow, often invisible accumulation of effort. Like consistency shapes identity. Every time you show up, you reinforce the message, I am the kind of person who does this. Over time, the behavior stops feeling forced and starts feeling natural. The person who writes a page every day becomes a writer. The person who practices an instrument daily becomes a musician. The person who studies consistency. Identity is not built in bursts of passion. It's built in repeated action philosophically. Consistency is humility in practice. It's admitting that greatness is not achieved overnight. It's recognizing that mastery requires repetition, and repetition requires patience. Intensity often comes from pride, the belief that you can conquer in a single blow. Consistency comes from wisdom, the recognition that excellence is earned through steady accumulation. Now, this doesn't mean intensity is useless. There are moments in life that demand it, deadlines, crises, opportunities that require extraordinary effort. But if your entire strategy is to wait for intensity, you'll never make it. Those rare bursts must be built on the foundation of consistency. Otherwise, they collapse under their own weight. Consider the tortoise and the hare. The hare represents intensity, fast, flashy, and inconsistent. The tortoise represents consistency, slow, steady, and reliable. We all know how the story ends. Success is rarely about who starts fastest. It's about who refuses to stop. Consistency also builds trust. Think about it. Who do you rely on more? The person who shows up occasionally with great enthusiasm, or the person who shows up every time, quietly, without drama? Life rewards the reliable. Opportunities flow to those who can be counted on, not those who merely dazzle in moments of intensity. And consistency does something else. It compounds like interest in a bank account. Each small effort builds on the last. At first, the results are invisible, almost discouraging, but over time, the growth becomes exponential. Skills sharpen, habits solidify, momentum builds, and what once felt insignificant becomes unstoppable. So when we talk about work ethic, don't be fooled into thinking it's about burning yourself out with bursts of effort. True work ethic is about stability. It's about building a rhythm, a discipline, a commitment to the process that no excuse can disrupt. It's about becoming the kind of person who can be trusted not only by others, but by yourself. In the end, consistency outshines intensity because consistency lasts. Intensity fades when energy runs out. Consistency remains even on the hardest days. That is the true foundation of work ethic. One of the most dangerous habits a person can develop is the habit of making excuses. Excuses are subtle and they sound reasonable. I didn't have the time. It wasn't the right moment. Someone else got in my way. These statements may contain fragments of truth, but at their core, excuses are a way of avoiding responsibility. And when you avoid responsibility, you forfeit growth. Responsibility is at the heart of a strong work ethic. To work with integrity is to accept ownership of your choices, your actions, and ultimately your results. It's easy to point fingers at circumstances, at other people, or at bad luck. But the truth is, as long as you put the blame outside yourself, you're powerless to change anything. Excuses protect your ego in the short term, but they imprison your potential in the long term. Think of it this way. When you take responsibility, you gain control. You're no longer waiting for the world to shift in your favor. You stop being a victim of circumstance and become an agent of change. That shift in perspective, moving from blame to ownership, is one of the most transformative decisions you can make. Responsibility empowers you because it forces you to recognize that if the problem lies with you, so does the solution. Psychologically, excuses are comforting. They protect us from shame. They allow us to avoid the painful truth that maybe we didn't try hard enough, or that maybe we failed because of our own shortcomings. But here's the paradox. The very pain we try to avoid is the pain we need to face. Growth comes from confronting weakness, not disguising it. Every excuse we make is a lost opportunity to improve. Philosophically, responsibility is tied to freedom. It might sound strange at first. How can responsibility make you free? But think about it. The person who refuses responsibility is always dependent. They are dependent on others for their success, their happiness, their security. Their life is controlled by forces outside of them. In contrast, the responsible person carries a heavier burden, yes, but they also carry the power to shape their own destiny. Responsibility is the price of freedom, and when it comes to work ethic, responsibility translates into reliability. A responsible worker doesn't say, I couldn't finish because something came up. A responsible person says, I should have planned better. Next time I'll do it differently. That attitude builds trust, and trust is the currency of opportunity. Employers, leaders, and even friends naturally rely on those who take ownership. Why? Because they know such people won't waste time with excuses. They'll focus on solutions. Look at history's great achievers. Were they free of obstacles? Of course not. Many of them faced crushing disadvantages, poverty, discrimination, failure, rejection. What separated them from those who gave up was not luck, but responsibility. They didn't dwell on what wasn't fair. They worked with what they had. Responsibility turns limitations into challenges, and challenges into growth. Excuses, on the other hand, turn limitations into walls that never move. Now, responsibility doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you never fail or that everything will go as planned. It means that when failure comes, you own it. You ask, what could I have done differently? What lesson can I take from this? That posture of accountability transforms mistakes into stepping stones instead of stumbling blocks. Without responsibility, every mistake becomes another excuse, and the cycle repeats endlessly. Here's a practical example. Imagine two students who both fail an exam. One says, the teacher is unfair. The questions were too hard. I had other things to do. The other says, I didn't study enough. I need to manage my time better. Next time, I'll prepare differently. Which of these two will improve? Which will succeed in the long run? The answer is obvious. Responsibility is the key that unlocks growth, while excuses lock the door and throw away the key. At its core, responsibility is about character. A person with a strong work ethic doesn't need to be watched or threatened. They take initiative, they admit mistakes, they seek solutions, they treat their word as a contract. That's why responsibility is so rare and so valuable. It requires courage. It requires you to stand in the truth of your own shortcomings without flinching and commit to being better tomorrow than you were today. So when we talk about work ethic, we must understand that it's not just about effort. It's about ownership. You cannot control everything in life. Accidents happen, injustice exists, circumstances are not always fair. But you can control how you respond. You can choose to either blame the world or take responsibility for what is within your power. Only one of those choices leads to growth. There is a dangerous illusion in modern culture that results alone defines success. If you make the sale, if you get the promotion, if you win the trophy, then the process doesn't matter. But this is false, deeply false, because how you achieve something is just as important as achieving it. The method shapes the meaning. If you compromise your values, if you cheat or deceive, if you trade your integrity for short-term gain, you may look successful from the outside, but inside you will know that it's hollow. A strong work ethic demands not only effort, but effort with integrity. Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. It is refusing to cut corners even when you could get away with it. It's holding yourself to a standard not because someone is grading you or checking up on you, but because you know that the way you work today is building the person you will be tomorrow. Integrity is less about what you do in public and more about who you are in private. It is character revealed through action. Why does this matter? Because integrity compounds just like effort does. Each time you choose honesty over dishonesty, quality over laziness, fairness over manipulation, you strengthen your own foundation. And over time, this foundation makes you unshakable. People begin to notice, even if not immediately, they begin to trust you. They know that your word means something, that your work carries weight, that you can be relied upon. Trust is one of the most valuable forms of currency in life, and it can only be earned through consistent integrity. You contrast this with the person who cuts corners. They might rise quickly, but their success is fragile. They always need to hide something, to cover their tracks, to pretend. Their work may appear solid, but beneath the surface, it is weak. And eventually, the cracks show. The deal falls apart, the reputation collapses, the shortcuts catch up with them. Success without integrity is like a house built on sand. It may look impressive, but it cannot endure. Psychologically, effort with integrity also protects you from cynicism and despair. When you know that you have given your honest best, you can live with the outcome, even if it's not perfect. Failure doesn't crush you because you know it came honestly. In contrast, if you achieve something through dishonesty or laziness, you can never fully respect it. You might celebrate outwardly, but inwardly you'll know, I didn't truly earn this. That kind of success eats away at you from the inside. Philosophically, integrity is the bridge between effort and meaning. Work without integrity may bring comfort or recognition, but it does not bring meaning. Why? Because meaning is found in alignment between your actions and your values. If you work hard but betray your own conscience, you are living in conflict with yourself. That conflict cannot, but when you act with integrity, even hard work becomes fulfilling because you know that your actions are consistent with your principles. Let's take a simple example. Imagine two builders working on a house. One decides to save money by using weaker materials, cutting corners that no one will see right away. The other takes the harder route, using strong materials, paying attention to detail even when it's slower. At first, both houses may look the same, but when storms come, the difference is revealed. The house with integrity stands, the house built on shortcuts falls. This metaphor is life itself. The storms will always come. Difficulty, pressure, temptation, failure. If your effort is not backed by integrity, your success will collapse under the weight of those storms. Effort with integrity also ends. When people see someone who refuses to compromise their values, they are reminded of what is possible. In a world filled with shortcuts and dishonesty, integrity shines as rare and powerful. That's why leaders with integrity are followed, not because they are the loudest, but because they are the most trustworthy. And in the long run, trust attracts loyalty, and loyalty sustains success. Of course, integrity is costly. It often means more effort in the short term. It may mean slower progress, fewer shortcuts, or lost opportunities that could have been gained through dishonesty. But integrity is an investment. You sacrifice a little now to gain much later. And what you gain is not just external success, but internal strength. The knowledge that you are building a life that cannot be taken away by circumstance because it is rooted in character. Effort without integrity is like speed without direction. You may be moving quickly, but you are lost. Effort with integrity is slower at times, but it is purposeful. And purpose, not speed, determines where you end up. So when we speak of work ethic, we must go beyond the simple idea of hard work. Hard work is important, but hard work without integrity can be destructive. Criminals work hard, manipulators work hard, but their work corrodes them and harms others. True work ethic is honest work done with care, consistency, and alignment to principle. That is what makes success meaningful and sustainable.